For many years, Disney prided itself on being a company known for making family fare, but would appeal to everyone of every age. However, there came a point when they became associated only with movies for children and lost the teenage audience, especially during the 70s. Even when Disney tried to court an older crowd with movies like The Black Hole, Midnight Madness, Tron, and the dark comedy The Devil Max Devlin, their desired audience rejected them, partly because they did not want to see a Disney movie. In fact, Disney got complaints for releasing Max Devlin, including casting Bill Cosby as the devil. That was an actual problem people had with that movie. Thus, Ron Miller had the idea to create a label specifically for films that were not an appropriate fit for the Disney name, and Touchstone Films was born. The first movie released under this label was the comedy Splash, starring Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah. Interestingly enough, Ron Howard was concerned directing this movie might get him labeled a Disney director. Splash became a box office hit and one of the highest grossing films of 1984, proving this experiment was a smart one. Some months after that, Miller was ousted from Disney and in came Frank Wells, Michael Eisner, and Jeffrey Katzenberg. The latter two had come from Paramount, and thanks to the formation of Touchstone, they were able to still greenlight the kinds of movies they were accustomed to making at Paramount. The next hit for Touchstone was Down and Out in Beverly Hills, starring Richard Dreyfuss and Bette Midler. This was the first R-rated movie released by Disney, and also started a lengthy working relationship with Midler. Another Midler-starring comedy, Ruthless People, also did very well, and the name of the label was then slightly tweaked to Touchstone Pictures. Touchstone produced a sequel to The Hustler titled The Color of Money, starring Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, and directed by Martin Scorsese. In addition to doing well at the box office, Newman won his only competitive Oscar for the movie. Jim Varney, who'd gotten attention for a series of commercials playing the Southern character Ernest P. Worrell, signed a deal to make an Ernest movie for Touchstone. The first of these, Ernest Goes to Camp, performed well at the box office, which led to 3 more movies for the studio. The label continued to produce more hits during the 80s, including Chris Columbus's directorial debut Adventures in Babysitting, the buddy cop movie Stakeout, and the teen romance Can't Buy Me Love. One of the most impressive box office performances came with Three Men and a Baby, a remake of a French movie. Audiences really took to it in the on-screen pairing of Tom Selleck, Steve Guttenberg, and Ted Danson as 3 bachelors who take care of a baby. It even became the highest-grossing movie of 1987 in North America. Good Morning Vietnam, starring Robin Williams, was another very successful Touchstone release. With their smart budgets and right pairing of stars and material, Touchstone not only allowed Disney to make more than just their traditional family films, it was a huge help to the studio at a time when those were struggling to attain a sizable audience. In fact, during the 80s, Disney would release more movies under Touchstone than through Walt Disney Pictures. Probably the most ambitious Touchstone film was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It was originally intended to be released with the Disney name, owing to its premise of cartoon characters running around Los Angeles. However, the more risque and off-color jokes led to it going out as a Touchstone movie, which was probably the right choice. Despite the movie going well over budget, it was a huge success and deserves credit for helping reignite excitement for Disney's own animated movies. Another notable Touchstone hit was Cocktail, starring Tom Cruise, even though it got terrible reviews from critics. The sentimental drama, Beaches, and the dog comedy Turner and Hooch also did nicely for them. Then there was the drama Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams, which pulled in strong numbers during the summer of 1989. Most notably, it became the second Disney-produced movie to be nominated for Best Picture after Mary Poppins. Heading into the 90s, the number of movies released by Touchstone increased. They scored a particularly massive hit early in the decade with the romantic comedy Pretty Woman. That movie was originally a much darker drama, but Jeffrey Katzenberg suggested it might work better as a lighthearted rom-com. He turned out to be right, as it had incredible staying power at the box office and for a time was Disney's highest-grossing movie. A movie that had big aspirations was Warren Beatty's comic strip-inspired Dick Tracy. Even though it was originally marketed as a Disney movie, they eventually decided to put it out under Touchstone, as the gangster violence was a better fit there. While the budget ended up higher than Disney initially wanted, they were confident it would perform like Batman the year prior, and went all out in hyping the movie up. While it performed well enough, it did not come close to the studio's expectations. A sequel was never produced, which was a combination of Disney's general disinterest and Beatty's perfectionism in owning the rights to make one. There was also the interesting case of The Rocketeer. Even though it had the hallmarks of a Touchstone movie, it was released as a Walt Disney Pictures movie. When it disappointed in North America, it was labeled a Touchstone film for the international release, but that did not seem to make much of a difference at the box office. For the most part, Touchstone continued to throw the dice on recently budgeted films and seeing what stuck. One such hit was the comedy Father of the Bride, starring Steve Martin and Diane Keaton. With its blend of humor and heart, it appealed to audiences during the Christmas 1991 season. Less pleasing was the gangster movie Billy Bathgate, which had a Dick Tracy-sized budget, but did not come close to making it back. The Whoopi Goldberg comedy Sister Act proved to be a sleeper hit though, as was the Tina Turner biopic What's Love Got to Do with It. The family film Three Ninjas also did quite well, but for whatever reason the sequels moved over to TriStar Pictures. The stop-motion animated film The Nightmare Before Christmas was originally supposed to be released under Disney, but they got nervous and thought the audience would find it too dark, so it ended up being a Touchstone release. After its box office success, and especially after it became even more popular on video, Disney would eventually change their mind, and now if you watch the movie on Blu-ray or even Disney+, it's the familiar castle logo that opens the movie. As the Touchstone films continued to increase, so did the chances of a flop. While the label would do reasonably well overall, it had its fair share of misses, like It's Pat, A Simple Twist of Fate, My Boyfriend's Back, and most infamous of all, the Shaquille O'Neal genie movie Kazam. A highly regarded film that may surprise you did not make its money back on original release was Tim Burton's Ed Wood. Despite winning 2 Oscars, it did not make much of a splash, but thankfully found more viewers on video and is now seen as one of the highlights of Burton's filmography. Like other Hollywood studios, action movies provide some of Touchstone's biggest grossers. The Ron Howard film Ransom was very successful, and a particularly fruitful partnership was formed with Jerry Bruckheimer. He had already scored a hit for Disney's Hollywood Pictures label with The Rock. He would then move over to Touchstone with another hit Nicolas Cage vehicle, Con Air, and the following summer Bruckheimer produced the enormously successful asteroid movie Armageddon. Touchstone would partner with other studios, handling the international distribution for a few of their major titles. These included Columbia Pictures' Air Force One, TriStar Pictures' Starship Troopers, and Paramount's Face Off. Touchstone would also find itself in a bit of controversy when releasing Martin Scorsese's Kundun. A biopic on the Dalai Lama, the film angered the Chinese government to the point of announcing they would ban all Disney movies from the country. As a result, Disney did not give the movie much of a release, and Michael Eisner even went so far as to call Kundun a stupid mistake. Disney sure threw Scorsese under the bus there. The movie is not even streaming anywhere, and it took Kino Lorber for the film to finally get a Blu-ray. A young filmmaker Touchstone took a chance on was Wes Anderson. After his second feature, Rushmore, had been turned down by New Line, he took the project to other studios, with Disney picking it up. It performed okay at the box office and got great reviews, with Anderson making his next 2 movies, The Royal Tenenbaums and The Life Aquatic, for Touchstone as well. The studio would score a big hit with the Adam Sandler comedy The Waterboy. It even had the highest opening weekend for a November release at the time. Although Disney surprisingly did not hold on to Sandler after that, as he would then sign a deal with Sony Pictures instead. Touchstone would also do well with the teen film 10 Things I Hate About You, the Bruckheimer-produced thriller Enemy of the State, and the international distribution of the Julia Roberts romantic comedy Runaway Bride. And even though it was not a moneymaker, Michael Mann's The Insider got fantastic reviews from critics and was nominated for Best Picture. Touchstone did close out the decade with 2 huge flops though. One was John McTiernan's The 13th Warrior, which went wildly over budget and lost a lot of money for Disney as a result. The other was Chris Columbus's sentimental science fiction film Bicentennial Man. Disney was already concerned about the film's cost early on and partnered with Sony on the budget. Sony would also handle the international release, so in the end 2 studios lost money rather than just one. The 2000s would continue to provide a mix of projects from Touchstone. M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable did not quite reach Sixth Sense numbers, but it performed respectably enough. The Coen brothers' O Brother Where Art Thou did okay, but the soundtrack was where its success really took off. There was also Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer's expensive war film Pearl Harbor, which had high expectations heading into the summer of 2001. Despite being heavily mocked by critics, the film was still profitable, although not nearly to the extent Disney was hoping for. Meanwhile, they had to deal with 2 movies whose subject matter led to them getting delayed due to September 11th. The action movie Bad Company and the ensemble comedy Big Trouble, neither of which made much of an impact when they finally reached screens. Shyamalan would give Touchstone yet another hit with the Alien movie Signs, and the romantic comedy Sweet Home Alabama scored the highest opening weekend in September, a record it would hold for 10 years. The comedy Bring Down the House was also a hit thanks to its solid staying power at the box office. However, a certain theme park-inspired movie would be released by Disney that would forever change the future of Touchstone Pictures. That film was Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. The film was given a PG-13 rating, and Disney decided to take a risk and release it under that name. After the movie became enormously successful, it showed teenage-skewing films could be released under Disney without turning off that audience. This thus opened the floodgates to more films like Pirates of the Caribbean opening with a castle. The rest of the decade did not help matters. Films like Hidalgo, King Arthur, and especially The Alamo were big disappointments for Touchstone. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was a potential franchise starter, but its grosses were considered underwhelming and no sequels were made. The Village performed decently, but Shyamalan would then end his deal with Disney after executives criticized his script for Lady in the Water. The studio did have some other hits here and there. These included the thriller Flight Plan, the dance movie Step Up, the comedy Wild Hogs, and the rom-com The Proposal. Disney would become mostly uninterested in releasing these kinds of movies though, preferring to focus on major tentpoles, leading to the acquisition of Marvel and Lucasfilm. In 2009, Disney signed a deal with DreamWorks Pictures to release movies under Touchstone. This helped provide a few hits for them, including the Best Picture nominated The Help, the robot fighting movie Real Steel, and most notably 3 movies directed by Steven Spielberg: Warhorse, Lincoln, and Bridge of Spies. Meanwhile, 3 animated films were released under Touchstone for various reasons. Elton John's passion project, Romeo and Juliet, was distributed under that label, so people not think it was produced by Walt Disney Animation, and it ended up being a surprise hit. Hayao Miyazaki's World War II film The Wind Rises had a more adult tone than his other work, so it was decided it would be more appropriate under Touchstone than Disney. As for Strange Magic, that was a movie inherited with the Lucasfilm deal, which Disney was stuck with, and it was quietly released without much fanfare. Eventually, Spielberg became dissatisfied with DreamWorks' place within Disney and chose to end the partnership and move over to his old home at Universal. The last film released as part of the DreamWorks distribution deal was the drama The Light Between Oceans. With how Touchstone had been exclusively releasing either DreamWorks movies or select animated films, I had a feeling at the time that this would be the final film under that label. And several years later, it turns out I was right, as The Light Between Oceans would indeed be the last time anyone would see Touchstone Pictures and its logo at the start of a new movie. When it was announced that Disney would co-produce and handle the international distribution for the Unbreakable sequel Glass, I did hope Touchstone would show up again. However, Disney instead opted to distribute it under the Buena Vista International name. The final nail in the coffin was when 20th Century Fox was acquired by Disney. Why resurrect Touchstone when they now have this other studio to produce and distribute more mature films? While the 20th Century output is not nearly as high as what Touchstone used to release in its prime, Disney is at least using that studio to release the kinds of movies that were common under it. I personally think Disney should take even more advantage of 20th Century Studios in the same way they used to utilize Touchstone. It could be a big help for Disney, like their former mature label was for them in the 80s and 90s. In any case, the impressive number of popular and beloved films released by Touchstone Pictures will always remain an integral and important part of the Mouse House's legacy, and one of the principal reasons they were able to grow into the major studio Disney is today. See you next time.